Shalom, this is video number 2 in the Jews Not for Jesus. Why we just do not believe. And what to say when somebody accosts you and pretends to be Jewish or claims they're Jewish and says you should believe in Jesus. Now again, this is nothing against Christianity. Christians want to live as Christians. That's perfectly fine. We know Judaism was 2,000 years before Jesus. Jesus lived as a Jew. Christians want to be Christians, that's fine. But don't try and be Jewish and believe in Jesus. It just doesn't work. It's religious treason. Now, somebody says to you, why don't you believe in Jesus? You simply say, why should I? I'm very happy with our religion, and our religion was 2,000 years older than Jesus. Well, then they say, well, why really don't you believe in Jesus? Well, number one, nothing happened when he came to indicate to us the Messiah was here. The world's still a mess, and the Bible never talks about two Messiahs. The Hebrew Bible is quite clear that a human being can't be God. And throw it back at them and say, well, don't you believe in Muhammad? There's a billion people there who say Muhammad came and gave a better revelation. Or why aren't you Mormons or Moonies? People keep coming and saying, I got a better, or Baha'i, we got a newer revelation. So why does it logically make any sense that God would come twice and not 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times and sending new prophets? Why do you stop there? It doesn't make any sense. Well, then they say, well, but doesn't the Old Testament have verses proving Jesus is the Messiah and God? Well, I dealt with the main virgin birth one before, but you can deal with every single one. And throw back at them Numbers 12 and Deuteronomy 13. Numbers 12 clearly says only Moses gets word for word, and Deuteronomy 13 warns exactly about this problem happening. And then just say, doesn't it bother you that never once ever does it specifically say Jesus anywhere? I mean, what would have been the big problem for God to simply whisper it to somebody? Oh, there's this guy going to come at some point named Jesus. You have to twist and turn every verse, and they're all mistranslations anyway. Doesn't make any sense. Well, then they say, well, if you don't accept Jesus, you're going to hell. Well, you know, from our point of view, anybody who tries to seduce a Jew away from Judaism is going to hell. The Bible is very clear about that. It's religious treason. But in any case, we don't care if you believe in Christianity. That's perfectly fine. Christianity is a perfectly fine religion. It's monotheistic. It has the basic ideas of Judaism. You don't have to be Jewish if you're Christian, but you certainly have to be Jewish if you're Jewish. And to abandon Judaism for another religion, which for Jews doesn't make any sense, is not meaningful. Well, then they might ask, well, then what is Jesus to you? And to be very respectful, you could say to them, well, what is Muhammad to you? I mean, that's what Jesus is to us. And I explained in my Jews for and Jesus video more about this. Jesus was a very nice guy, I'm sure. He kept kosher, he observed the Sabbath, he prayed our prayers. He was a teacher. This was a pre-rabbi, so I wasn't really have that title. But I believe that he was Messiah or God. That's heretical and blasphemy in our perspective. Then what if they get mad and say, well, didn't your people kill Jesus? Well, then say to them, well, didn't your people kill 6 million Jews? No, our people didn't kill Jesus. We believe that, I mean, if you read the whole history of the period and know how the Jews changed our texts because they about the Hanukkah in the Talmud because they were worried about the Romans, so it's clear that the Christians changed the New Testament, we believe, because they were worried about the Romans, and so they blamed the Jews instead of the Romans. But even so, the Catholic Church in Vatican II said that to say that is a sin, that Jews killed Jesus. And even if there were a few bad Jews at that time who did something wrong and were worried and they were complicit, so you're going to blame me 2,000 years later for that? I don't blame you for Christians killing 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. So then they'll finally say, well, if Jesus was a Jew, so why can't you believe in Jesus and still be Jewish? Well, once you decide a human being is God, you're no longer Jewish. Once you decide that there's any other God before Adonai, you're no longer Jewish. Once you decide in the Trinity, you're no longer Jewish. So God is infinite, ultimate, unknowing, unfathomable in its entirety. And you cannot believe in God and believe that Jesus is the Son of God and still be Jewish. The Supreme Court of Israel has ruled that in the case where a guy who was born Jewish who showed up in monk's clothes tried to be admitted as a Jew under the law of return. The Supreme Court realized, funny you don't look Jewish. Well, he's not Jewish. So Christians should be Christians, Jews should be Jews, and don't ever buy this stuff about Jews for Jesus or that this Messianic so-called Jewish thing. It's just all charlatan, and there's nothing to it, and we believe it's religious treason.